My name is David Corbin. I'm an emeritus professor of health education and public health from UNO. And I also taught energy policy at Creighton University, and I'm on the advisory board for the Center for Climate Health and Equity of the American Public Health Association, and have done other training on environmental health, as you can see on the screen there. I want to also acknowledge Al Davis, our Sierra Club lobbyist. Sometimes when people think of lobbyists, they think only of big business with big money going in and lobbying legislators, but we are one of the few, the Nebraska Chapter Sierra Club environmental groups here in Nebraska, that also has a lobbyist that specializes in environmental issues. And Al Davis is a former state senator, and we're happy to have him on board with us. I also want to acknowledge Ken Winston, who is our Nebraska chapter community organizer, and he has also been involved with our legislative committee and helping us to monitor bills and try to get through good legislation and stop bad legislation. First, I want to acknowledge the people who were here in Nebraska before us. Remember that if you're from the Omaha area, that Omaha means that people upstream, and in environment, that's an important thing, because upstream ends up causing problems downstream. And so from an environmental point of view, you want to try to stop as many things upstream as possible. The first bill I want to talk about was originally introduced as LB 1255 by Senator Bostar. And this is to have a state climate change plan that would update what happened in 2014 and 2015. You can see the titles of those two climate reports that came out from UNL. Incidentally, those reports were produced with UNL's money because the legislature didn't want to fund any climate changes that would include the contributions that humans made to climate change. So they went ahead and did this on their own. And as you can see, it's been since 2015, a lot of things have changed. And so this is only asking for $150,000 to update the reports and recommendations. And that was then added to LB 1014, and that was passed. And so it looks like at this point, as I'm recording this, that will go through. If the governor should decide to veto it, the good news is that most of his vetoes on other bills have been overridden. And should that happen, we think that would happen with this bill as well. LB 1102 is adopt the Nebraska Environmental Response Act and change provisions relating to enforcement of environmental protection requirements. This is largely in response to what happened at the AltEn ethanol plant in Mead, Nebraska, where they were processing seeds that were treated with fungicides, insecticides. And that's why you see the green color there, which is part of the dye that they put on the seeds, so you can tell the difference between treated seeds and non-treated seeds. And then over there on the other side, you see the wet cake, which is the byproducts of making ethanol piled up there, and that is all contaminated with those same chemicals. I'll come back to talking about AltEn in a few minutes, but that particular bill, 1102, is a good bill. I mean, it has some weaknesses. It should have some more things in there, we believe. It implies that Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy couldn't do more to stop this situation from happening. This bill is try to make it clearer that these kinds of things could be stopped and so that it won't happen again, because nowhere else on earth have this many treated seeds come together in one place. There's another build that basically is a historic win, $8.3 million for the Mopac walking, biking trail. And that passed. And then the governor vetoed it, half of the money, the governor vetoed. But then that veto was overridden. And so that last part of the Mopac trail will be completed. And here you can see one part of it, one part of the completed trail. And so that's a good thing for people that want to get in the outdoors, go out and be in the environment, and maybe contribute to the local economies too, because people who go through, who might stop at restaurants and stop for refreshments, or maybe even have bed and breakfast or something like that. So that's a big plus for people who enjoy the environment here in Nebraska. Now back to AltEn. We're back there because there's a bill that was not a bill, but a legislative resolution to establish a special oversight committee to investigate the environmental disaster at AltEn ethanol plant in Mead, Nebraska. This is still in committee. Not sure why, because we really need a lot of answers to what happened here. And in this picture, you can see the different companies put different colored dye on the treated seeds, and that's why you see so many different colors there. And all those dyes mean is that those seeds are treated with different kinds of chemicals that can end up being in the air, on the soil, and in the water. And although they were threatened with many different fines, they were never fined by Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. And that's why we believe that there should be this special oversight committee to investigate what went wrong. Why weren't we able to keep all of this environmental disaster from happening? So here you just see another view of the wet cake, which is the byproducts from the ethanol. This is all contaminated with those chemicals that are treating the seeds. And some of it, you may have heard that one of the tanks developed a leak, and that spread at least 6 miles. For a while, they were putting some of this stuff on farmland as fertilizer, and fortunately that was stopped because that was contaminated. Here's one of the solutions. The seed companies came in and said, we're going to try to remediate this, at least to a certain degree. They haven't gotten rid of it, but so they covered it with this thing called posi shell. That's why it's now white compared to the picture you just saw. But already, even shortly after they put this on, and they had to use helicopters to put it on in some places because they couldn't reach it by spraying it with a hose. But you can see that water is already developed on there. There's cracks in it, and it may help with odor, but how much it helps with the chemical runoff and leaching into the soil is another reason why there should be a special committee to figure out what is the ultimate solution going to be for AltEn. Fortunately, LB 1068 has given the authorization for a university team that includes UNMC, UNL, and people from Creighton to continue their work on the impacts of the AltEn facility. So that includes doing human health outreach and finding out if people have symptoms, but it also includes studying pollinators and other animals in the area to see what happens. So it was an amendment which has $1 million appropriation fund for this assessment team. And that took a lot to get to that point, because originally there was appropriations for $10 million over 10 years, and that didn't happen. And so then there were other ways to try to get this, but fortunately it finally got to that point. And so that health assessment and research assessment will be able to continue, and we'll be able to find out more and more about the effects of AltEn. And thanks to Senator Blood for all of her hard work to make sure that this got done. In the hearings, nobody spoke in favor of it, and groups like OPPD and NPPD spoke against it, as did the Sierra Club. And it takes away or weakens public power by saying, well, less of the people that are on the board should be elected by the people, and maybe some of them should be appointed by the governor. And perhaps it was drew attention to some senators, because you see headlines like this: in a red state first, Nebraska plans to decarbonize power sector by mid-century. And that's because our public power boards like Omaha Public Power, OPPD, and Nebraska Public Power District, NPPD, have set goals for, as well as Lincoln Electrical System, have set goals for decarbonizing at the latest with OPPD and NPPD by 2050, but LES by 2035, and they may actually move those goals to an earlier date. Some people evidently didn't like that in the legislature, and they think, oh, well, this is not good, that the people can have a say and address. We think it is good. Fortunately, LB 1045 did not make it through the legislature this year, but rest assured they will be back. And there's another thing that I'll be talking about later that shows how that might be. Those of you who are in the passport participation program for Sarpy County, there's your participation code, Climate Bills 2022. Now, in addition, hundreds of millions of dollars were set aside for the Perkins Canal, which is supposed to assure water coming from Colorado into the state, but the total cost of that would be at least $500 million eventually. And then there's also money put aside for a lake between Omaha and Lincoln, a large lake. And there are environmental concerns, there are property concerns, and so it's pretty likely that there will be some lawsuits if these things move forward the way they were intended to move forward. Well, this is what I was referring to earlier. So here's a legislative resolution that will have a hearing sometime this year. And you can see that they say the purpose of this is to propose an interim study to examine the Nebraska revised statutes to update, modernize language, and determine if any updates or revisions for electric generation and transmission, for governing approval of and decommissioning of electric generation facilities, for statutes governing the Nebraska Power Review Board, and adherence to public power suppliers. Now, keep in mind that our public power is quite reliable, certainly compared to most other electric companies. It's quite affordable compared to most, and it's been operating extremely well. So why there's this move to say, as we mentioned earlier, to try to say, well, the legislature needs to step in and try to fix something that, in the view of the Sierra Club, is not broken in the first place. So what we need to do, as you see at the bottom, is we need to assure that the hearing is open to the public. Sometimes they have hearings and they only invite the people who are coming, and that's not a good thing. We need public input, and so you need to help us keep an eye out for that and be able to have public input. And I'm going to end with this because not all things that have to do with the environment, of course, don't happen at the state level. They sometimes happen at community level. And so although this is Sarpy County, the climate change plan for Omaha is not really just for Omaha, it's for the metro Omaha area, even including Council Bluffs. And so there's supposed to be a climate action plan, and they're supposed to be hiring a consultant to come in to help with this climate action plan. They still haven't done that yet. And so it's important to also keep track of what's going on locally, whether it's in Bellevue or whether it's in Omaha or whether it's in Papillion or Council Bluffs and other municipalities within the metro Omaha area. So I just point out that keep in mind that there's local legislation that we need to do to make sure that we're taking care of the environment. So I appreciate all the people who came to this particular presentation, and I hope that it will encourage you to pay more attention to what's going on legislatively. If you want to keep up with that, you can go to the Sierra Club's webpage, which is sierraclub.org/Nebraska. You'll also see that there's more information about, and that was on one of the slides, about the AltEn situation. And so you can check out our Facebook page and other environmental organizations. And that way you can be assured that we'll have a better environment for the future for all of us. Thanks.